in the open wilderness where they pursued them. And all of them to the very last had fallen by the edge of the sword. All Israel returned to Ai and struck it down with the edge of the sword. And all who fell that day, both men and women, were 12,000, all the people of Ai. But Joshua did not draw back his hand with which he stretched out the javelin, until he had devoted all the inhabitants of Ai to destruction. Only the livestock and the spoil of that city Israel took as their plunder, according to the word of the Lord that he commanded Joshua. So Joshua burned Ai and made it a forever heap of ruins, as it is to this day. And he hanged the king of Ai on a tree until evening. And at sunset Joshua commanded, and they took his body down from the tree and threw it at the entrance of the gate of the city, and raised over it a great heap of stone, which stands there to this day. If I had to give this message a title this morning, my message would be Turning a Defeat into Victory.
Amen.
Turning a defeat into victory. And in Joshua 8, they're returning to a place where they were beaten up before. They had gone to war before and they lost in chapter 7. And the reason that they lost that battle was because they were not in the right posture with God. Someone in the camp had sinned, and he had deceived all of Israel. So when they went to fight on this particular day, this fight occurred right after the fight in Jericho, and they had been victorious. So they knew that they were going to be victorious in this fight also. They weren't aware that there was sin in the camp. So when they went out against Ai in chapter 7, they were defeated, and the people of Ai, the army of Ai, ran them away from the city, and they ran with their tails tucked between their legs because they were fearful. And they ran back and they complained to God. God, what are we going to do? What are other people going to say about us now? They know that you were with us, and here we have this defeat. So they became fearful. So Joshua went into prayer, and he wanted to know why they were defeated. So God revealed to him that there was sin in the camp, that Achan had taken some things that he was not supposed to take. They were not to take any of the spoils away from that city in chapter 7. And because of that, they lost the whole battle. So now we come to chapter 8. And we see that God is telling them to go back to Ai. There are 5 things when you fail or when you are defeated that you can do to turn that defeat into a victory for yourself. Most times when we go through something and we fail at it, let's say you're opening up a business for the first time. And you work this business, you put all your energy into it, but yet somehow that business fails. Instead of us picking ourselves up and moving forward, restarting the business.
That's right.
We stop.
Jesus.
We become fearful. We start to doubt that God even told us to have this business. We question. So there are 5 things I want to share with you today to turn a defeat into a victory.
Amen.
The first thing is to turn defeats into victories. We need to remember that God never forsakes his children, no matter how they fail him. I don't care how we tend to fail God. He never takes his hand off of us or forsakes us. He's always with us. Joshua 8:1a says, Then the Lord said to Joshua, Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. After we have sinned, usually the devil will whisper in our ear, You messed up big time. God can never use you again. It is at just a moment in Joshua's life following that humiliating defeat that God specifically reminded Joshua of his promise. I'm sure after that defeat, the morale in the camp was low. I'm sure the people became depressed, and they started to grumble and worry. They didn't have any confidence in themselves as an army. So they started to grumble. Why did God allow us to fail? Why were we not victorious? What did we do to deserve this? Did not God say that he was going to give Ai to us in our hand? So what happened? Why were we defeated? And so they grumbled and they complained and they questioned. Which is sometimes the same things that we do when we have a failure or a defeat. We grumble and we complain. We don't take into account that our posture might have been off. There was something that we missed. We don't take that into account. We automatically figure, oh well, I just give up. The second thing that you need to look at to turn a defeat into a victory is we need to learn to not repeat the same mistake. Amen. How many times have we gone through a situation and that situation repeats ourselves? But as it repeats itself, we don't do anything different. We handle it the same way that we handled it before when we failed. How is your situation going to change if you use the same methods and methodology, the same mindset that you used when you failed? The enemy comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy. And part of his methodology is to deceive you. He doesn't want you to fulfill the purpose that you have. That's right. He wants to make you think that God can never use you because of that past failure. But I'm here this morning to let you know that the devil is a liar. Yes, he is. He's a lying wonder. Yes. In Joshua 8:1-B it says, this is God talking to Joshua, take the whole army with you. God's word to Joshua was to use all of the fighting men of Israel, not to leave any back this time. In other words, this time he was to take the whole army with him. Even though the primary cause of defeat at Ai was Achan's sin, a contributing factor was underestimating their enemy. It was also pride. How many times when we get in a situation do we underestimate our opponent, or we underestimate the enemy? We underestimate the tactics that he used and the devices that he used to cloud our minds and to confuse us. How often do we get in trouble because we make the same mistake twice? To get back on track, we need to be willing to listen to God and to fully obey him. Amen. The third thing that will turn a defeat into a victory, we may have to go back to the place of an earlier defeat. You're going to have to revisit that defeat that you had. You're not going to be able to move forward and be victorious unless you go back to the place. Joshua 8:1-2. Go up and attack Ai, for I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, except that you may carry off their plunder and livestock for yourselves. Set an ambush behind the city. Joshua is told again, go back to Ai, the place of your defeat. So he's going to return to that place of defeat. And now, because they're in a right position with God, there's no sin in the camp at this time. So now they're set up for a victory. Amen. God has given them specific instructions. You're not to leave any of the army back. You're to take them all. But now he's going to divide it. Joshua and the elders will be in one place, so that they can be seen by all of Ai's army and the king. And the other part of the army is hidden in an ambush. They're hidden behind the city. One thing that Israel came to understand is that they must have God's power even for taking the smaller city of Ai. With the power of God, even Jericho could be taken. And without the power, even the seemingly insignificant small place of Ai could not be taken. They had to understand that they were utterly dependent upon God's power for any success. How many times do we launch out to do something, and we don't pray to get instruction before we move? You don't pray and ask God, okay, Lord, you've told me to do this, but how am I to go about doing it? What steps do I need to take? Who should I need to speak with? And how am I going to achieve this task? We just go haphazardly into something. We don't think about it. We don't pray and ask for God's direction. And without God's direction, you set yourself up for failure. That's true. Because if you pray and ask him, he's going to give you step-by-step instruction on what you need to do. I'm not telling you something I think. I'm telling you something I know, because I've prayed and it's been proven to me over and over and over again. Every time I step into a situation where I've not consulted God first, I fail. But every time I have to make an important decision, and I consult God first, and I listen to what he tells me, and I follow his instruction to the letter, I don't care what the circumstances look like, I obtain a victory. Amen. It's in those times that I go before God. I go and I launch out before him. And I don't pray and ask him for any instruction or direction. That I find myself where I fall flat on my face. And it's at those times that I used to become fearful. And notice the term that I use. I used to become fearful. I no longer become fearful anymore. Because I know without a doubt that once I pick myself up from whatever that situation or circumstance is, and I go before God, he's going to give me instructions on how to use that defeat and turn that defeat into a victory. Amen. So we have to understand there are certain things that we're going to need to do. Number 4, to return defeats into victories, we need to remember that the recovery of lost ground is always, always, always a painful process. And it's always costly. We're starting over. So we have to go way back to the beginning and start all the way back over again. That's a costly price that we pay when we're disobedient and we don't listen. We have to be attentive to what God is telling us. In chapter 7, there's no erasing the fact that they lost 36 men due to disobedience. But what I think is great is I see how God used that previous defeat as a springboard to their next victory. Even though they were defeated in Ai in chapter 7, God turned right back around in chapter 8. He sent them back to the place of their defeat, but he sent them there with instructions. It was a different plan. They approached it differently. They had a different attitude, a different change of mind. They didn't go approaching it the same way that they did in chapter 7. In chapter 7, they underestimated their enemy. In chapter 8, you see that they were there to confuse the enemy. The only way you're going to turn a defeat into a victory is to confuse your enemy.
Amen.
And you can't confuse your enemy using the same tactics that you used when you were defeated.
That's right. Praise
You
God.
have to have a different heart,
That's right.
a different mindset,
That's right.
and you have to have a different tactic.
That's right.
When people go into the armed services and they go to basic training, they're going so that they can get a different mindset. Their minds have to be conditioned, if you will,
That's right.
for battle. They have to be conditioned. All that other stuff that they do goes out of the window. And they have to learn the tactics, the strategic plans for their opponents. And that stuff is pounded into them day after day, night after night, until that's all they know. That's all they remember. They don't remember any of that other stuff. And just like they have to be conditioned, we have to be conditioned when we go into battle.
Amen.
I don't care if you have been defeated. There's a change of mind that must take place if you're going to become victorious.
That's right.
You can't go into a battle with the same state of mind that you had when you were defeated.
That's right.
It's just not going to work.
Not going to work.
When we have these things in life that set us back, circumstances, situations, doesn't matter what kind, we have to understand that there is a position that we must take when we go through these things. You can't always let the enemy throw a sword at you and it lands here and it looks like you're going to fall. You have to do something different. So, what I'm suggesting and what works, if you read God's word, God tells us that we can speak those things that are not as though they are. It's hard to speak something as if it's hard sometimes to speak those things that are not as though they are when you've been hit to your core.
That's right.
It's hard to speak the positive when you're walking in negative and all you see is negative circumstances around you. It's hard to do that. The enemy is crafty. And he hits you where he knows it's going to hurt the worst. And our natural emotional reaction is fear, doubt, and sometimes even unbelief. Because we start to question God. Oh God, why did this happen to me? How could this happen to me, Lord? Why am I finding myself in this place? With that state of mind, you're going to stay in that place.
That's true. That's true.
So when the enemy attacks you, you have to learn how to give a spiritual response versus an emotional response.
Amen. Amen.
So the spiritual response would be to worship.
That's right. Praise
Or
God.
to let out a praise.
Yes. Glory to God. Praise God. Yes.
A positive spiritual response would be when that person get on your last nerve. Instead of saying what you want to say to them, you lay hands on them and you pray for them.
That's right.
That confuses your enemy.
That's right.
Because you're doing something that he did not expect you to do.
That's right.
And that's how you're going to become victorious.
Yes.
You can't use the same tactics that you used previously in this day and this time to confuse your enemy and become victorious. I don't know if you know this, but every time you go through a trial now and you've gone through that trial and you've done it victoriously, have you not noticed that seconds later something else is coming behind
Jesus.
you?
Jesus.
You're getting trial after trial, circumstance after circumstance. You cannot afford in this day and time to not Look at these things in a spiritual sense. The enemy is running to and fro, seeking whom he may devour.
That's right.
And he knows that his time is very limited right now.
That's right.
He knows that he's on the cusp of being defeated forever.
That's right.
So he's going to throw everything he can at you at this time and in this stage of your walk. He's going to throw everything he can at you to make you back up. His whole job is for you not to get to that divine purpose that God has created for you. So he's going to put things in your path to distract you, to confuse you, to draw you away. He'll make you believe that you're not anointed. He'll make you believe that you're not appointed. He'll make you believe that God can't use you. He will even use family members to implant little negative seeds in your mind. And if you allow him entry, he will have you doubting yourself. And not only yourself, but he'll have you doubting God. So we have to be wise and crafty in the way we approach dealing with negative circumstances and situations that come into our life. We have to remember that the battle's already been won for
All
you.
right now. Amen.
I read the book.
Praise God.
And we're the victim.
Yes.
He can only do to you what you allow him to do.
That's right.
So it's time for you to get mad. It's time for you to become angry
That's right.
and say, I'm not going to allow it any longer. You have to increase your prayer time.
That's right.
You have to increase the time that you're in the Word. Because those things, you can go to sleep at night and things will be fine. And you wake up in the morning and you in the midst of a battle you didn't even know was coming. And it's hit you at the core of your very being. I'm not telling you something like this. I'm telling you what I know because it's been happening. I've had person after person after person come to me on my job. And they're so ready to give up. They've lost all hope.
Jesus.
And these are Christian people. They are not wanting to live. You cannot let the enemy trick you that way.
That's right. Amen. Amen.
You can't do it. You have to remember whose you are.
Amen. Praise God.
And what authority you have.
That's right.
And you need to learn how to rebuke the enemy.
That's right.
Step on his head.
That's right.
Tell him he's a lie.
That's right.
Repeat what God said
That's
about
right.
you.
Glory to God.
You were uniquely and divinely created.
Yes.
There is not another you.
That's right.
He cannot snatch your purpose away from you and your success unless you let him do it.
Amen. Jesus.
It's when you give in and you become fearful that he takes a greater hold. That he tries to take a greater hold. But you can stop that.
Amen. Praise God.
I work at an addiction facility. And we had a patient that we had to do a Marchman Act on and send them back to the psychiatric hospital. I received a call about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And this person was in their room. And they had just been checked on 10 minutes ago. And when the nurse went back to check on that person, they found them hanging from a door where they'd taken the sheet of their bed and tried to hang themselves. Had it not been for the grace of God, they got there in time that the person did not die.
Praise God. Amen.
But their purpose and their intent was to lose their life because they felt that they were hopeless.
Jesus.
They didn't have any hope left. They didn't have any family who wanted to be around them because of the things they've done through their addiction. They felt all alone. And our therapists had worked with this person and worked with this person. They prayed with this person. They tried to reunite that person and the family. But at that stage of their addiction, they could not understand why anyone would want to be reunited with them because of all the things that they've done. They couldn't understand how much God loved them, even in the midst of their addiction. They couldn't grasp a hold of that. And when you told them that God loved them, they said, how can God love somebody like me? After I've done all the things that I've done to my family, after I've stolen from them. I woke up in places I didn't even know how I got there. Doctors and psychiatrists call addiction a disease. I'm here to tell you it's a trick of the enemy. That's right. It's a trick of the enemy to destroy that person at the very core, to take them out of their family and to set them apart so that they feel hopeless, so that they can take their own lives. And when you work around as many as I do, you see it every day. I have people that have successfully completed the program. And they're released, and they go home. And 2 months later, you get a call from a family member to say, we just called to tell you that so-and-so took their life this morning. They could never regain what they felt they lost. They stopped going to church. They stopped reading their Bible. They put all other things before God. They let the busyness of their lives and the things which they felt was so important take over. Until there was no turning back. They didn't know how to get back to God. They refused to believe that God loved them so much that they were forgiven. They had grace. But the enemy tricked them so successfully that they took their own life. And that's how he works. We have to be very careful. You have to be careful what you let in your gates.
That's right.
And by your gates, I mean your hearing.
That's right.
What you're seeing.
That's right.
Who you're around.
That's right.
What you speak for. Your words have life. They have the power of life, or they have the power of death.
That's right.
And I know we say that all the time, but I really don't think you understand how crucial that is. We're made in God's image. And he breathed the breath of life into us. And in his word, he has said that we would do greater than what he did.
That's right.
So just like he spoke the world into existence in 7 days, you have the power and the authority to speak things in other people's lives. So you have to be very, very careful what you say about people.
That's right.
And how it comes out of your mouth.
That's true.
Because you can start a negative chain reaction in that person's life,
That's right.
or you can start a positive chain reaction in that person's life. And I was always taught by my mother, God rest her soul. If you can't say anything nice about people, keep your mouth shut. Don't say
That's right.
anything.
That's right.
Because you open up all kinds of things against people's lives. God is with us constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So, think about this. This is something that I ask a lot of questions when I'm studying, and this is something that I was asking and God showed me. He gave me like a little vision. Every time we tell a lie, he's right there. He hears a lie, he knows it's a lie, and he's watching. Every time we go into a place we should not, we're taking him with us. Every time that we use this little connotation that people use, you're going to make me become unsane. You can't make me become unsane.
That's right. Amen.
Because I'm not going to allow you to put me in a place where I'm going to respond to you that way. I will walk away and pray before I open my mouth to say something negative to you. And that's how we have to become.
That's right.
We have to be so careful, so careful
That's right.
of what we speak. Think of the things that you said about people, and think about whether it caused something positive in their lives or something negative in their lives. Just think over the last, we won't even go 5 years back. Think over the last couple of years, last 2 years. Last 2 years. Think of the negative things that you said to people. I tell young parents all the time, do not call that child stupid.
That's right.
That resonates, and it stays with them for their whole entire life. You have to learn to speak positive things over your children. My children are grown. They have children of their own. And to this very day, not a morning goes by that I don't wake up